Astora was searching for the boy when, by chance, he encountered Iris. In his rush, he stumbled and accidentally pulled the queen into a nearby pond. When Iris informed him that Theo had already returned to the great tree where Shima was preparing food, Astora felt a wave of relief. Still, he was deeply embarrassed by his clumsiness, his cheeks flushing with red. Iris, observing his gentle and sincere nature, began to feel affection for him. They sat by the water's edge, letting their clothes dry in the sunlight. Once they were ready, the two made their way back to the great tree. Theo, upon seeing Iris growing close to Astora, felt a surge of jealousy. Still, the scene of everyone cooking and enjoying each other's company was one of pure contentment. Soon, a delightful meal was ready. The guests from the kingdom of Kuro were quick to praise the flavor of Shiro's wild plants after just a single taste. Curious, Iris asked Astora if he found the taste too bitter. Although it was his first time trying such plants, Astora admitted that the bitterness was a bit much for him. However, he also noted how different, and in many ways, superior, the vegetation of Shiro was compared to Kuro's. Their interaction only brought them closer, causing Groza to feel jealous. But her annoyance faded when Theo offered her some wild plants to try. She found them lacking in salt. Anticipating the strong palates of their guests, Shima had brought salt just for them. As Astora and the envoys from Kuro enjoyed the meal, Theo suggested a trade agreement so that the Dark Kingdom could regularly enjoy Shiro's cuisine. Iris, a peace-loving queen, wished for the two nations to forge a lasting friendship and experience many more tranquil days like this. But the time of peaceful days in Shiro was drawing to a close. Astora and Edders prepared to return home. The King of Light himself bid them farewell and returned their weapons with honor. Before leaving the kingdom, Astora and Edders decided to visit the King of Light one last time. The envoy's ship was filled with generous gifts from Shiro, and Groza was astonished by their kindness. Iris had finished writing a formal letter to propose a trade treaty, and with time running short, she expressed her heartfelt wish for enduring peace between their kingdoms. The two realms had now entered into a new relationship. However, Edders' mood suddenly shifted. He believed that only a powerful nation like Shiro, blessed by sunlight and ancient energies, could live in such abundance, while the dark and barren land of Kuro could never share in this peaceful life. Iris understood his frustration, but reminded him that balance had long been maintained in this way. Enraged, Edders accused her of using her power to dominate. In a flash, he lunged at the queen. Her guards, caught off guard, couldn't respond in time, but Astora, acting swiftly, struck Edders down and saved Iris at the last possible moment. The shocking act stunned everyone. Despite Astora's heroism, Theo was overwhelmed with emotion and assaulted him. Iris wanted to intervene but was too shaken to speak. Astora, helpless, was imprisoned by Theo. Meanwhile, Groza, still joyfully examining the gifts, was abruptly ordered to leave. Completely unaware of the chaos unfolding, as night fell, Theo was overcome with guilt and fury, blaming himself for the situation. He began to question whether peace between the two realms could ever exist, believing that knights like him would always be drawn into conflict. Theo's younger brother, idealistic but inexperienced, believed his brother was overly concerned. He thought eternal peace was a fantasy, as all people must eventually die. True growth, he believed, required sacrifice, but not necessarily war. Although Theo dismissed his thoughts, he still held hope that the boy's kindness could bring change to this sorrowful age. At the same time, Iris cried out to the ancient languages, lamenting why peace was so difficult. If the world could only exist through conflict, she no longer had the strength to bear it. Then the ancient voices offered their guidance. Just as the moment of peace seemed to settle, a flash of blinding light transformed the graceful Queen Iris into a pure white cat. Meanwhile, deep within the dim, stone dungeon, Astora slowly regained consciousness. Covered in wounds, he stared at the shadows dancing on the walls, questioning if saving Iris had truly been the right choice. Unbeknownst to him, Edders had been entrusted with a secret mission by the King of Darkness, to trade identities with Astora upon arriving in Shiro. If Astora hadn't acted against Edders, perhaps Kuro would have experienced its first taste of sunlight in its history. Suddenly, a soft, radiant light pierced through the darkness of the cell, revealing a white cat standing silently at the entrance. The heavy cell door creaked open as if guided by an unseen hand. The cat turned and began walking away, glancing back as though beckoning Astora to follow. Understanding her silent invitation, Astora rose to his feet, pain in every step, and followed the mysterious feline. The prison halls were eerily empty. The cat led him quietly through the fort's outer walls, evading all watchful eyes, and then into the forest. They finally reached a high cliff where Iris often came to reflect in solitude. There, Astora was stunned to find his two swords, glowing with an ethereal halo. The white cat stepped forward and transformed into a radiant gem. As it shattered, Iris appeared, unconscious, cradled in his arms. When she awoke, their eyes met and their hands found each other. Iris, overwhelmed, finally released the emotions she had long kept buried. She confessed that the two kingdoms could never truly support one another, as war and conflict were always simmering beneath the surface. Seeing the weight she carried as queen pained Astora deeply. He embraced her, promising to stand by her side no matter what burdens she bore or mistakes she made. It was then that Astora revealed his true identity. He was the Prince of Darkness. Though Iris had already suspected it, based on his actions, hearing it confirmed was still striking. He vowed that as the future king of Kuro, he would do everything in his power to bring peace to the world. With Iris beside him, before long, the soldiers of Shiro arrived, and Astora knew he had to end the confrontation and return. As the stars began to emerge, Iris stood in her flower garden, thinking of Astora. From the moment he arrived in Shiro, she had sensed his noble nature and recognized his status. Yet, his overly sincere heart had made her question whether he could lead a country torn by strife. However, their conversation by the cliff the previous day had put her heart at ease. Meanwhile, demonic creatures from Kuro had started appearing more frequently in Shiro's capital and outer regions. Acting swiftly, Iris gave orders to reinforce all borders. Fios, deeply concerned about her waning strength following her titanic battle with Baal, wanted to take a short leave to find a cure. Shima protested, knowing the army could not afford to lose its commander while the kingdom stood at the brink of war. But Iris, ever composed, assured them she would recover, and that preparing for the darkness ahead was their top priority. Reluctantly, Fios departed, determined to help his queen. Realizing he couldn't find the cure alone, he sought out Atlantis, an experienced elf healer. After examining her condition, Atlantis explained that Iris had damaged her magical channels by exceeding her body's limits, and natural recovery would take time. Time they didn't have. With little rest and increasing threats, there was only one option: a dangerous location hidden deep within a cavern, said to house a divine light capable of healing her completely. Despite the risk, Fios was resolute. Iris had sacrificed everything for her people. Now it was his turn. Meanwhile, the sorcerers of Shiro, led by Shima, trained tirelessly to form a powerful magical barrier to repel the looming darkness. However, the spell consumed vast amounts of energy, and Shima herself grew weaker by the day. Still, none faltered. When news of Fios's disappearance reached Shima, she hurried to inform the queen. Iris, though alarmed, remained calm. She knew the knight was risking everything to save her. All she could do was hope for his safe return. Far away, deep in a forest of ancient trees, Fios and Atlantis finally arrived at the cave behind the sacred waterfall, home to the divine light they sought. Meanwhile, Astora, after fleeing Shiro on a flying vessel, returned to Kuro. He was briefly questioned about the situation with Edders, but little came of it. Wasting no time, Astora resumed his training with renewed determination. His mission was clear: to save both Iris and Fios, and to bring peace to a world split by shadow and light. The two nations were now fully engaged in war. Valis observed that Astora's resolve had shifted after his visit to the Shiro kingdom. The king of Kuro had issued a royal decree forbidding anyone from approaching Shiro. In Kuro, loyalty to the king's orders was paramount, and the people were bound to obey without question. In this world, the concepts of good and evil were irrelevant. A single moment of neglect could allow darkness to consume all that was good in an instant. Astora found the rampant evil troubling, but he dismissed the idea that peace would eventually prevail as the darkness consumed everything. He saw this belief as nothing more than a naive illusion. Valis, on the other hand, believed that a king's true responsibility was not to blindly speculate about the future, but to make calculated decisions that would guide the people toward a desired outcome. Despite this, Valus hinted that if Astora ever ascended to the throne, he would be ready to lend his support whenever needed. At that moment, Grossa rushed in, bringing urgent news. The monster beasts at the front were too powerful for the regular army to handle. The Dark King had ordered Grossa and the Dark Prince to deal with the rampaging monsters. Valus stood to the side, silently contemplating the king's intentions, as he alone understood the broader plan. Back at the capital, the soldiers and monstrous creatures were amassing for the coming battle. The Dark King was plotting a way to conquer the skies, using Kuro's might to snuff out the light of Shiro. Meanwhile, Astora and Grossa were on their way to confront the rampaging beasts when they were suddenly ambushed by massive, bee-like monsters. In the chaos, Grossa slipped and fell into a deep ravine. Astora, using his swift reflexes, managed to catch him just in time. Embarrassed and caught off guard, Grossa found himself face to face with the prince. Together, they scrambled to climb out of the ravine, only to be confronted by an even larger monster. Grossa reacted quickly, unleashing magical arrows, but the beast seemed unaffected by the attack, as though it was immune to pain. Undeterred, Grossa kept firing, but Astora, determined to settle the score, charged forward to face the creature head-on. As this was unfolding, the kingdom of Shiro prepared for a historic battle against the forces of darkness. The most elite troops were assembled, ready to defend the kingdom. Theos and Atlantis had ventured into the cave that held the divine light, hoping to restore Iris's magical strength. But the weight of leadership bore heavily on Iris, who now carried not just the responsibility of her wings, but of Shiro itself. She commanded her soldiers to fight Kuro, but inside she struggled with the notion of destroying the kingdom that had once been her ally. In her heart, she wondered if the balance between light and dark could ever truly be maintained. As Shiro's forces prepared for battle, deep within a dark cave, Theos seemed to reach a dead end. But Atlantis, ever resourceful, produced a small object resembling an arrowhead, which he used to secure himself to the ceiling. With a swift motion, he propelled himself forward, with Theos following closely behind. Ahead of them lay a straight path, though no exit was visible. The battle outside raged on. The monster beasts had breached the city walls, but the powerful magic of Shima, who had returned, vaporized them instantly. She reorganized the troops and devised new battle strategies. Meanwhile, Theos fought tirelessly, his exhaustion weighing on him as time seemed to slip away. Suddenly, Atlantis pulled out a lens and discovered a hidden passage in the stone wall. He touched it, revealing it to be a concealed spatial gate. Theos followed him through the passage, and soon they were faced with the sounds of chaos. Panicked citizens fleeing and the clash of swords as the beasts surged forward. Theos, impressed by Atlantis' skill, praised him for his cleverness in navigating this without using ancient magic. Atlantis, however, had a different secret. He produced small bottles, which he threw like bombs, causing explosions that revealed a large mineral rock. Theos, inspired by this, drew his sword and struck the rock. Each blow sent sparks flying, igniting unpredictable flashes of color. Seeing the transformation, Atlantis urged Theos to step back as he took out several staffs. With powerful, unparalleled magic, Atlantis cast a spell that slowly opened a doorway, revealing a magical light deep within the cave. At the heart of the cave, a divine light emanated from a shimmering lake, casting an ethereal glow. Atlantis stopped Theos from rushing toward it. The elf's eyes followed a stone he had thrown into the water, but he continued his journey forward, his resolve unshaken. For Atlantis, his own life had little meaning now. The remaining time he had was fleeting, and he moved toward the light with a determination that defied time itself. As the light enveloped them, Theos's armor began to glow, his every step resonating with the power of the divine source. But Atlantis, sensing that time was running out, pushed forward with all the strength he could muster, knowing that this was their final chance. From corrosion, yet Theos remained steadfast, moving ever closer to the divine light. A brilliant flash of white light erupted, and Theos, unscathed, successfully grasped the divine light. Meanwhile, enemy forces pressed deeper into the heart of the inner city, the situation as tense as a sword poised above their heads. Iris emerged, her power blasting the monstrous enemies into oblivion, commanding Shima and the sorcerers to cast a series of spells. They formed a protective circle, generating a massive shield to safeguard the kingdom. The queen, drenched in sweat, staggered before collapsing into Shima's arms. On the other side, Theos and Atlantia, just returned from their perilous journey, immediately sensed the gravity of the situation upon seeing the weakened defenses. Inside, a fragile Iris lay in bed, her body trembling. Elsewhere, Astora and Groza continued to battle the gigantic monster. Groza sent a surge of electricity to aid Astora, enabling him to leap and strike fiercely. After the battle, Groza suggested they head home, but Astora, in quiet contemplation, simply began to walk away. Sensing his inner turmoil, Groza invited him to a simple dinner of grilled fish. Astora glanced at her briefly before turning away, leaving her confused, though she managed a quiet laugh. Over dinner, bathed in soft light, Groza advised Astora to nourish his body in preparation for the throne. Astora, still cutting into his cake, couldn't shake his doubts. He recalled conversations with Valis, the mighty knight who had spoken of the blurred lines between good and evil in the ancient world. A world where darkness expanded at any given crack. These thoughts held no weight for Astora. He chose not to understand them. Upon hearing talk of the Light King's promise, Groza grew angry. She slammed her fist on the table, stood up, and approached Astora, declaring that he alone had the power to shape the world. She had always admired him, even from their first encounter. A heavy silence fell over them, and when Groza realized Astora's lack of response, she pulled away, tears welling up in her eyes. Learning that Iris held Astora's heart, Groza ran out of the room, leaving him bewildered. Hurt by her unreturned feelings, Groza nonetheless vowed to stand by him, no matter what. In a frantic rush, Fios entered Iris's room, handing Shima the vial containing the divine light, urging her to integrate it into the queen's body immediately. Once the spell was cast, Iris stabilized, though she had yet to awaken. That evening, Iris sat in quiet reflection, hands clasped, her thoughts drifting to the Dark Prince's promise of a new world, one of peace. A smile played on her lips as she longed to journey by Astora's side. Fios approached, and Groza reminded Iris not to overextend herself, as the battle loomed near. Their exchange was filled with both polite concern and deep care. Fios encouraged Iris to rest, though they both knew the tension outside would not allow peace for long. Astora, walking through the streets, overheard a vendor speaking of a duel with Shiro, causing him to pause in thought. The vendor, upon realizing he was speaking to a prince, hesitated and asked if Astora was contemplating a rebellion. Astora denied it, but remained distant, his gaze fixed on the gray sky where planes flew in formation, unsure of what the future held. The vendor, hopeful for a better future, whispered that if Astora ascended the throne, he would lower their taxes. A group of children, their eyes bright with innocence, ran toward Astora, pointing excitedly at what they thought was a floating island in the sky. They clung to the hope of victory, even as Astora's face betrayed his doubt. A contingent of armored soldiers arrived, causing a small girl to hide behind him, and they escorted him back to the palace. Groza watched Astora's retreating figure with a sorrowful expression, sensing that something terrible was approaching. Determined to escape whatever fate awaited them, Groza decided to pack her belongings and head to the sea. Meanwhile, Theos saw this as their final option and advised everyone to flee when it became clear they had no chance of victory. Yet Theo, clutching his chest, refused to give up, believing that his kingdom would never fall. Theos, too, held firm in his belief that as long as they had Iris, Shiro would never relinquish the throne. Iris, lost in thought, recalled the young prince's promise to create a new world, one of peace. Her eyes blazed with unwavering resolve. White and black, two polar opposites, one a blinding light, the other a mysterious, consuming darkness.